Welcome back, everyone. With the current election still in limbo, one of the main focuses right now is Arizona. And to get a better sense of what's happening on the ground, we have here to speak with us Adrian Norman. He's an Epoch Times contributor. He's also the author of the book, The Art of the Steal, Exposing Fraud and Vulnerabilities in America's Elections. He was just on the ground at some of the different protests taking place in Arizona. We're going to get some updates from him now. Let's jump into that. Adrian Norman, it's great having you back on Crossroads.
Hey, thanks for having me on, man.
So you were just out in Phoenix, Arizona. You're in Arizona right now. What was it like on the ground? You were covering some of these for Epoch Times, some of the events there, the protests there. What was it like on the ground?
Yeah, so yesterday there was a Protect the Vote rally that was held outside the facility downtown where they're doing the counting of the ballots for the Phoenix election. I think every day there's been some type of rally down there. Today there was a massive rally thrown by, I believe, Turning Point USA. Last night's was organized by a local group here. But there were hundreds of people out, man, and it was a good event. They made sure to remind everybody that it wasn't going to be any type of violent or threatening type of demonstration. You know, the night before there were a couple guys there who had, they had their rifles. This is Arizona. We open carry, so it's not strange to see a rifle or a handgun anywhere in the state. But at this particular type of event, we don't want to give the perception that we're trying to intimidate anybody or threatening anybody. So that was made clear. And it was just a true peaceful protest, as they like to say on the mainstream media. There's no violence, there were no fires. Everybody was respectful to law enforcement, even respectful to the elections officers who were working. There were a couple times when a few of them came outside the building, and they were welcomed with open arms because people just want to make sure that all the legal votes in this election are counted. And it was a good community vibe. At one point, we did sang the national anthem together, opened the event with the Pledge of Allegiance. So it was the best of what you would expect from conservatism or people on the right, I would say.
That's great. Now, in terms of what is happening with the counting of the ballots, we've seen a lot of reports, online saying that in Pennsylvania, for example, there's been back and forth legal cases with observers not being allowed to watch what's happening. We've seen videos online of them boarding up windows so you can't look in and watch them count the ballots. Did you see anything like that happening in Arizona?
I haven't heard anything like that. Nobody's really allowed into the facility from a public standpoint, but they do have people from both sides, I was told, who are watching the vote count. So there are Republicans and Democrats and independents who are taking part of the process. There's a lot of concern that there's going to be some sort of, chicanery going on, but I think the appropriate precautions are being taken. We've already seen some anomalies and malfunctions here in Arizona, which is not uncommon. So those fears that I think people have in wanting to make sure that it's a fair, transparent process, those fears aren't irrational fears. We have a history of weird things happening in elections here. Even this year, we had the issue with the Sharpie Gate.
Yeah, Sharpie Gate. That's right.
In some facilities where they were making people use Sharpies to cast their ballots rather than ink pens. The issue that they were having with a number of machines is that, if you use a Sharpie, the machines weren't reading the ballot. And the videos that were being posted on social media tended to be from areas that lean heavy toward Trump, where this was happening. I personally voted early. I used an ink pen. They had nothing but ink pens there. So the Elections Board issued a statement, I think, saying that it was a simple mistake of some kind and that people were allowed to cast another ballot, which is patently untrue, because I had multiple people reach out to me and say that either they or somebody that they knew were never able to actually cast a second ballot. So multiple people in this election in this state did not get to vote. I think I just saw earlier that the Trump administration as well is joining a lawsuit here in Arizona because of those disenfranchised voters. So I think I don't know how they're going to remedy that particular situation, but we're probably going to see some type of movement on that soon.
Yeah, I saw the reports on that too. Yeah, there's a group filing a lawsuit. The Trump administration is apparently, at least right now, does look like it's going to join that lawsuit. But yeah, I guess we'll have to see how it works out, because if their votes weren't counted, how are you going to have more people come back in and vote? And how is that not going to be another risk with the election if you allow a second wave of voting? It's a difficult question, I think. Now, Adrian, actually, I want to talk to you too, because I know you wrote the book on election fraud. you know, calling out some of the different anomalies we've seen in past elections. And I've read it. You did a very good job with it. You really document, cases, sourced everything. What were if we can go over just some of the main issues you've seen in your research, what are some of the main ways that we can prove that election fraud, vote fraud has happened in the past?
Well, here's the thing. We have a lot of documented cases. The Heritage Foundation keeps a track of, they keep a list on their website of all the actual prosecuted cases of election fraud. But, again, there's enough of it out there that I was able to write an entire book on this subject. So until prosecutors get aggressive about actually prosecuting these types of cases, we're not going to see much in terms of evidence. A lot of these cases don't get investigated. And, a lot of what I wrote about, we're seeing right now. We're seeing anomalies with dead people voting. We're seeing anomalies with the mail-in and absentee ballot system. We're seeing outright corruption from elected officials who won't allow certain people to be able to observe the counting process and ensure that there's a proper chain of custody and ensure that everybody's legal vote is being counted. We're seeing a lot of illegal voting. So a lot of the things that I talk about are playing out in real life. It's actually kind of surreal to watch it happen.
Yeah, well, you warned about it. Your book really warns of all the methods that have been used in the past that we can prove, and now we see a lot of that playing out. I read your book; it was very good. Now, I guess, Adrian, based on your research, what's happening right now with the elections, what do you think needs to be done in terms of restoring integrity of the election system? What can be done right now? Because this is how I see it. The way it's been happening, Trump very likely is going to have to take this to the Supreme Court, unless through local courts and local rulings and local politics can make them basically abide by what is the laws prior to this. Is what it seems like the push, because a lot of states changed election laws because of the CCP virus, because of COVID-19, and that has really changed the outcome of the election. It appears. It seems like Trump's not going to accept anything less than repealing that somehow. And if he can't solve it in the local courts and local government, he's going to go to the Supreme Court. And it's going to look like, I think the narrative for the next 4 years is going to be, that rigged the election. How do you think this can be remedied based on your research?
I mean, to back up for just a quick second, the COVID-19 pandemic was definitely weaponized. I think that was always the plan, to leverage the panic that people had regarding the pandemic. They put out a lot of shoddy research, a lot of shoddy data that's still being used right now. I mean, even the New York Times said up to 90% of these cases are positive test results that are coming back are false positives. We're not seeing, especially like in states like Arizona, we're not seeing increases in hospitalization rates. We're not seeing increases in mortality, which means the mortality rate is even lower if all these cases are going up, even assuming they're legitimate. And the death rate is essentially staying flat. So they exploited a lot of the fear and the worry that we saw due to the pandemic to create a system where we had this expanded mail-in voting system. And even without, people try to sort of conflate, mail-in voting with absentee ballot voting. It's basically the same thing, because the same issues that we're seeing with mail-in voting, we see with absentee ballot voting. The same issues persist in both systems, first of all. Second of all, in order to actually remedy the problems that we're seeing in our system, we've got to have changes at the local level. The problem is that all of these jurisdictions are in control of their own jurisdictions. They run their own elections. They're not subject to Washington bureaucrats or national mandates as we've seen in other areas. This is something that exclusively happens at a state and local level. So the first thing and the most critical thing is to get people in office who are actually credible. Get people in office who have a high moral compass and want to ensure free, open, and fair elections in our countries. Until we do that, nothing else matters. If the person who's counting the votes is shady, it's going to be easy to game the system. They're the ones that have controls of the voter rolls. They're the ones that have controls of the ballots. They're the one that have the chain of custody. Not, until recently, ballots weren't able to even be tracked online. So you don't necessarily know. You didn't previously necessarily know if your ballot even made it back to be counted. We've seen over the last few election cycles, millions and millions of votes get discarded, lost, but one way or another not counted toward the election total for some reason. So first thing has to happen, we have to get new officials in at the local level who actually care about quality elections. Second of all, we have to have some sort of voter ID system. there's got to be a way to tie a person's identity to their ballot so we can ensure that everybody's only voting one time in this country and that only eligible legal voters are casting ballots. Third thing I think that has to be mandatory is states have to clean up their voter rolls. You know, we wouldn't have circumstances with people who died in 1984 casting ballots in the 2020 election if their name wasn't listed on the voter roll to begin with. So we've got to go back and just do what Judicial Watch and other interest groups have been trying to get these states to do for a long time, which is just purge ineligible names for the voter rolls. And the reason they don't is because they're using them to commit fraud, which we're seeing right now. So until those three things happen, I don't expect that we'll see any major changes. But I think with what America is witnessing right now, with it being so in our faces with this presidential election, especially if the case goes to the Supreme Court, I think we're going to see a change in public perception, and I think we're going to start to see changes in local jurisdictions across the country to force some of these protections into place, because it doesn't matter which political party you're on. It doesn't matter if you're on the right or the left. We should all be confident that our vote counted and it wasn't canceled out by an illegal vote. And we should all be able to have confidence in the sanctity and security of our elections.
I guess, Adrian, this last question, you know, based on the situation we have right now, based on what's happening, what's going on in Arizona and other places like Philadelphia, Georgia, I guess based on your research, based on your reporting, if you were to leave us just with one thought in terms of, you know, how people should view what's taking place right now with the elections, the integrity of the elections, what would you tell them?
It's a coup. We're literally watching a coup. They're literally trying to steal the election. It's that simple. And I think Epoch Times is actually going to run a piece this weekend that I wrote explaining the reasoning why. So I'll give you all the details on that. But final thought is that America, the world, is watching one political party try to, in a Hail Mary event, unseat a duly elected president of the United States because their previous efforts failed. Impeachment failed. The Mueller investigation failed. This was a last-ditch effort. And it's really sad. It's a sad state in American politics when, you know, one party can't simply allow a duly elected official to serve out their term and wait for them to leave office before pushing to enact their own agenda. They have to go through these lengths and literally destroy the fabric of our democracy to get what they want. They love themselves more than they love this country. They love power more than they love the American people.
Adrian, thank you. Real pleasure having you on the show. Thanks again.
Hey, thanks for having me.